Those are the days.
The ding. Those are the days. What pages? Right. It's interesting, actually, that we're giving share tonight on Emor. There's a peculiarity in the calendar. Some of you might have realized, or some of you might have known. Last week in Israel, we were laying Parshas Emor already. Yeah. So this is my second week Parshas Emor. So I had Parshas Achremos for most of last week, and then suddenly we moved over to Emor. Because what happened is the last day Yom Tov was Shabbos. So we had Shabbos, we had Yom Tov, and they had Shabbos. So because we have Yom Tov, they had Shabbos. So therefore, they're 1 week ahead, and they're only going to catching up a Parshas Bechukosai. So that's another 2 weeks from now. So I heard Emor last week, and some of the things I'm going to say, actually, I heard in Israel last week, and I'd like to speak about certain things. Okay, let's start with the following. This has happened to me on more than one occasion, where we've had somebody come to me at shul, and they're a Kohen. And sadly, they're married to someone that they're not really meant to be married to. As a Kohen, we'll see in the Parasha speaks about the women a Kohen is or is not allowed to marry. A Kohen, a regular Kohen, is not allowed to marry a Grusha, a divorced woman, as well as not being allowed to marry a woman who is a Chalala, a woman who comes from a marriage that is also to a Kohen. Different people that are Kohen. A Kohen Gadol even is not allowed to marry an Almana either. He has to marry specifically a Basula, a woman who's never been married before, because he's the Kohen Gadol. But everybody else, the regular Kohanim, cannot marry divorcees. It happens that Kohanim do marry, I guess we'll say marry in inverted commas in this case, divorcees. We have people in the shul, more than one, where you have a Kohen that is married, for want of a better word, to divorcee. They can't really get married under Chuppah Kiddushin because nobody's going to really give them a Chuppah Kiddushin. However, this is where we're at. So you have a Kohen and a divorcee that are married to each other. So I've had a conversation on more than one occasion. Hi, David. We've had on more than one occasion, we've had the following conversation where somebody's called up the shul and said, Rabbi, I'd like to join the shul. To which I've said, okay, no problem. He says, but we need to just tell you something before we join the shul. I said, what is it? So I'm a Kohen. I said, okay, you can join the shul even if you're a Kohen. We don't discriminate against Kohanim. He says, no, you don't understand. I'm married to someone who is a divorcee. I said, oh, okay. I said, well, okay, then I just need to give you the following caveat. And that is, if a Kohen is married to someone he's not allowed to be married to, now the halacha is he loses his Kohen privileges. He does not cease to be a Kohen. That's a very important distinction to make. A Kohen who is married to someone that he's not allowed to be married to remains a Kohen, and therefore such a person would have to go into the Kohen ohel by a funeral. Can't say, well, I'm married to someone I'm not allowed to be married to. I can go in with dead people. I can go into the Beis Olam. They're not allowed to walk into the actual Beis Olam. However, Duchening, no. First Aliyah, no. Because those are special privileges that have been reserved for Kohanim, and they're reserved only for Kohanim who have fit under a certain rubric of halacha. So, the Pasuk says the following. So I have to say, one second, so I have to say to this fellow, I said, look, you can't get the Aliyah of a Kohen, and you can't Duchen. And again, it was a very uncomfortable or strange conversation because the fellow, knowing, or I now know that he's not so religious, basically said, well, like, all right. It's like that kind of thing, like, if you don't behave, you can come. I don't want to come. Like, like what kind of punishment is that? Like, can you not come up with something that's a little bit more punitive than that?
Go to your room.
Yeah, I know we used to have that. We had one of my kids, we used to send him to his room, but he loved reading, and we were like, we have to give him a different punishment because we sent him to his room. He loved it. He pulled out a book and he sat on his bed and like, go to your room for 10 minutes. I'll be there for half an hour. I'll see you later. Sometimes you get the feeling that the punishment has been lost on someone there. So you have to be very careful. So the verse, so he says to me, okay, look, I can live with that. So there's a very important verse to mention over here.
He has to go without drinking the food, doesn't he?
Okay, so that's an interesting question. If a person who's a Kohen has to go out during Duchening. Officially, he does not have to go out during Duchening. Officially, as long as he's not moved from his place by Ritzei, when the Kohanim make their way forward, he does not need to go out. However, the minig is that a Kohen that doesn't Duchen does leave the shul. So in general, that's what they do. And this question comes up with Avelim also, because Avelim don't Duchen for the first year. I think the Sfarim only don't Duchen for the first month. But by the Ashkenazi, we don't Duchen. Yeah, that's what Shulchan Aruch says. Shulchan Aruch says Sfarim for 30 days. But the Ramah says we have the minig for a whole year. So any Kohen who doesn't Duchen, but you don't Duchen for a year, so you go out. That seems to be the prevalent custom that they do. So the Pasuk says the following. The Pasuk tells you all the halachas whom they can become Tomei to. And then it says, Kiddoshim, this is in chapter 21, verse 6. Kiddoshim yu leiloheim. They will be holy to their God. V'lo yichalalu, and they won't profane Shem Elohim, the name of their God. Ki es Ishei Adonai, the Ishei, the fire offerings of Hashem. Lechem Elohim, the bread of their God. Heim makrivim, they bring as an offering. V'hayu kadosh, and therefore they should be holy. Okay? Says Sefarno, a very, very important comment. And the comment is as follows. Sefarno says, when you have a Kohen, how come the Kohen can't say, look, I'm Michael. When it comes to kavod, when it comes to giving honor to certain people, there's sometimes a discussion about if you're able to be Michael on your kavod. So, for example, a parent, in halacha, when a parent walks into the room, really a child should stand up and give kavod to their parent that way. Yeah? And I see you smiling. Why?
You've never seen it happen.
You've never seen it happen. I'm not seeing it happen yet either. The people are few and far in between that actually get up for their parents when they walk in. But from the halacha, so why in general do we not do that? You know why in general we don't do that? Because parents don't seem to be very particular about it. If the parents were particular about it, then the kids would have to do it. Right? If a parent was particular and says, I feel that you as my child, when I walk into the room for the honor, it's never a good idea to ask for honor because that always backfires. Whenever you say to people, I deserve kavod, people run away from that. Nobody wants to hear somebody saying they deserve kavod. We all hate that.
In my day, you stood up when the teacher walked into the room as well.
Sure. Well, we also have to stand up when the teacher walked in. Even today, I went into school. They stood up.
Oh.
They all stood up. I think that's one thing they still do in certain schools. You come in and they stand up. I even know people that are very particular about it. So you stand up when the teacher walks into the room, and if it's loud, they stand there, and you stand and you stand. Yeah, it used to work. I don't find that works so well anymore. But that was a sweet way of doing things. Hi, Anthony. There's Anthony in Israel. We met him on the flights. Now he's watching from Israel. Hope you're having a good time there. So why don't we do that? Because a parent can say, I'm willing to forgo that honor. Yeah? A Ramai can say, I'm willing to forgo the honor. One of the examples the Gemara says, a king is not allowed to forgo his honor because the king is the king. And if the king forgoes his or the queen forgoes her honor, then the whole monarchy falls apart because, if the king becomes just one of it. And it's part of the issue. Nowadays, okay, we don't have the same sort of monarchy that they had in the olden days. But if the king became just one of the boys, yeah, then he's not the king anymore. Part of being royalty was the fact that you were somebody totally different. Right? You were not like everybody else. You were the king. Hey, Stuart.
When you spoke, people listened.
That's right.
Yeah.
But you were the king. There was a certain, and it's sad today because you look out at what goes on with royalty today. I don't think they have that same gravitas anymore. And nobody looks at them in the same way because they've just become like everybody else. Yeah? There's a certain, the queen is still the queen. I think there's something very special about the queen. I think the queen has a very regal way about her. Charles is a step down, but there's something real about him. I think Charles's kids, they're already they seem to be, better off and better educated British teenagers or British young marrieds.
Also, they've mixed with the population at one time. Buddha stood apart.
Yes, that's right. They have mixed with population, but the way they've gone about finding their spouses, everything, they've become much more normalized, so to speak, that we don't look at them in the same way. Says Seforno, what about Kohanim? They have an important discussion. What about a Kohen? So Seforno says a Kohen is not allowed to be mochel on his covet. Because he says, Ki omnam hakavona bekavod hakohanim hulchvod hakel yisbarach. When we give covet to the Kohen, when we give honor to the Kohen, who are we really trying to honor? The Kohen? Not the Kohen. The Kohen is the representative of the servant of Hashem. And therefore, in giving up on that honor, what is he doing? He's giving up on the honor of Hashem. And that he doesn't have a right to do. Personally, I can give up on my honor, right? And many times as a rabbi, I will give up on my honor. You know, people sometimes say things to me that they shouldn't say. Or sometimes we have conversation that we shouldn't have, and sometimes people, you know, are not as respectful in a way that maybe they should be towards a rabbi. But I don't sit down. I'm not going to sit down my high horse and say, excuse me, take that back now, I'm a rabbi, right? Because, you know what? That's fine. Because it's my honor, so I can decide. I can or I cannot decide. I can be very, very particular about my honor. I can decide not to be so particular about my honor. Whereas a Kohen, his honor is not his personal honor. When it's not your personal honor, it's a much bigger problem. So I'll give you two examples of this, right? Have you ever heard of somebody when they say the following, you've brought a family into disrepute? Yeah? Many a time, members in a family don't only represent themselves. They represent a family. They represent certain values of a family. And so therefore, what happens when these people act very dishonorably? What do we now say? Oh, it brings shame on whom? On the family, right? And that's where the issue is. And therefore the person says, well, I'm acting in a vacuum. None of us ever act or live in a vacuum. You don't function in a vacuum. And therefore, if you bring disrepute to yourself, many times that comes with bringing disrepute to your family. And that's unfair already. Because now it's not only about you, because, okay, you might say to yourself, I don't mind about my honor. Maybe you don't mind about your honor. What about everybody else around you that's affected by it? And I think more importantly, even than family, I think us as Jews often have that. We're all tarred with the same brush, aren't we? And sometimes you have certain people that act very badly. And then you say, you know what? He's acted badly and people are coming to me and people are giving me hassle because of this guy's actions. The extreme example of this is radical Muslims. Yeah? You take non-radical, regular Muslim people that live in this country. Many of them, probably a great majority of them, if not all of them, are horrified at some of the things that are going on in their name. And there was a whole hashtag going on for it, and the whole protest was called Not in My Name. That's what it was. Because here's a whole population of millions and millions of people that are being tarnished by some fundamentalists, and everybody starts making comments about, you know, radical Muslims and what they do and how they're wrong, etc., when really they might not represent, or probably don't represent, the majority of people. Even if the problem is even they're a minority, even a 10% or 5% minority of 1.5 billion people is a huge amount of people. So you're dealing with a tremendous amount of people that you're fighting against. But what you have here is an issue where the majority, but the silent majority, gets tarred by the very vocal minority. And we as Jews have the same issue, so that if people act dishonorably, suddenly everybody says, yeah, you know, this is how Jews behave. No, that's not how Jews behave. One Jewish person did something that was wrong, or 10 or 20 or 100. But why does that mean all of us are no good? But the problem is, and this is what's very important, You have to realize that you never only represent yourself. Specifically as Jews, you never ever only represent yourself. You represent, if you're visibly Jewish, definitely, you represent us as a Jewish people. And what you do will be taken as, rightly or wrongly, fairly or unfairly, what you do will be taken as a representation of Jews in general. When you say, that's not fair, I'm just one of 14 million. Tough. Hello. Which means we need to be aware of that. And it means we need to behave in a certain way to make sure that people don't look at us and say, oh, those Jews. You know the famous thing, people say, don't confuse Jews and Judaism. And it's true. On the other hand, what else am I going to try to criticize or try to figure out about Judaism? Who else am I going to look at, if not for the Jews, to figure out something about Judaism? So whilst it's true to say one, it's true to say the other also, and it becomes very, very problematic. But that's the first point that I wanted to make. So that's the first thing to say, is that number one, we as human beings do not live in a vacuum, and therefore the Kohen doesn't live in a vacuum, and his disrepute is disrepute of God, and therefore he needs to be careful. He can't say, I don't mind, I don't care. You might not care, that's true. But it's not only you. That's the first point. And the second point is as Jewish people as well. Okay, now we move on to the next point. This is a point that was made last week by the Tolner Rebbe. The Tolner Rebbe is, it's my brother-in-law's Rebbe. He goes to him and he goes to hear shir. And my brother-in-law, I've got cousins with Hasidic Shapayas and the long thing and everything. They're properly Hasidic, although their father's not so Hasidic. He's Hasidic inclined or Hasidic at heart, but he doesn't wear the Hasidic clothes. And the Tolner Rebbe is the Rebbe of a Hasidus called Tolner. Very, very, a very, very special person, the Tolner Rebbe. And he gives a shir every week on Thursday night that many, many people listen to, and that's recorded, etc., etc. And the Tolner Rebbe said he got the following question. This is an interesting question. In this week's Seder, we read about all sorts of mumim, all sorts of physical blemishes that a person might come upon that would disqualify them from being Kohanim. And there was a fellow who was a Kohen, who was sadly a quadriplegic in a wheelchair. And he came, well, I guess all quadriplegics on a wheelchair. That's sort of a bit of redundancy. Sadly, right? Obviously not making fun in any way, but I'm saying, but they're just, that's sadly their situation. And this quadriplegic came over to the Haradonka Rebbe, to the Tolner Rebbe, and asked him the following question. It says, Rebbe, I'm a Kohen, right? When Mashiach comes, I won't be allowed to serve or maybe when Mashiach comes, hopefully everybody will get healed. I think it says that everybody will get healed, but he says, if the Beis HaMikdash was built today, I would not be able to serve in the Beis HaMikdash. Sadly, I'm disabled. He says, but that sounds very unfair. He says, I don't get it. Who made me disabled? God, right? So God made me disabled. And then after making me disabled, he punishes me and says, by the way, and no disabled people in my temple. Wait a minute. That sounds really unfair. If I did something wrong personally, right, in the case of the Kohen that we mentioned before, okay, the Kohen has a choice. He married somebody he wasn't allowed to marry. Fine, we give the Kohen a punishment. The Kohen's not allowed to, not allowed to be a Kohen anymore. Understood. However, here you have a person that has done nothing wrong. The fact that they are the way they are is God's doing. And then God has some kind of tying against them. God has some kind of problem with them and says, and by the way, because you're not 100% healthy, therefore you don't deserve to serve in the temple. It sounds unfair.
Is that reversible with the Kohen?
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Is it reversible with
with the Kohen it is reversible. If the Kohen gets divorced from the divorcee, then the Kohen goes back to becoming to being allowed to duchen and being allowed to be called up, for Rishon. But the question here remains, I think the question is a very, very strong question. It's unfair for God to create a situation where a person is not able to do certain things and then to punish them for the fact that they can't do it, when it's Him who put them in that situation in the first place. So Tona Rebbe asked him that question. And the Tona Rebbe said to himself, okay, you had to go and you had to prepare a shir, and he sat down and he prepared this shir, or the idea that I'm going to hopefully present to you. And he came back to him the week afterwards, and the quadriplegic said to the Rebbe, he says, Rebbe, I want you to know I've thought about the question. Yeah, and I want to tell you one thing. I don't know if you'll be able to answer the question or satisfactorily, but don't worry about it. After 120, I'll go up to God. I'll ask Him the question. That's what he said. I'll ask God, you did this, so why'd you do this? I said, Tona Rebbe says, I prepared a whole shir because I was asked the question, so I wanted to make sure that I would be able to give this shir, be able to give an answer. But he felt, and this is a tremendous sensitivity on the part of the Rebbe never gave the shir as long as this man was alive and was still coming to shiurim, because he felt it was still not properly sensitive to this fellow's plight. And so he waited, the person passed away, and he says he gave the shir last week. That's what he gave the shir on. So he said that within, and this is the interesting, he gave a very interesting answer, and I think within it there's a great understanding that we need to have in how to look at our service of Hashem. And that's the following. When it comes to God, we have two ways that we connect with Hashem. There's Avinu Malkeinu. Yeah, do you see that? The two things? Avinu is our father, Malkeinu is our king. Right? There's a very, very big difference between a father and between a king. A father, hopefully, has love for every single child. And every child is different. And every child has their own blessings. And every child is a wonderful blessing. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks at every child and says, you are my child, I love you, you are the way I created you, this is how it is. We as parents, we all know our kids have flaws. If any of you tells me that his kid does not have no flaws, we all know what, you're lying. I know all my kids have problems, but so does everybody else. That's what makes them human. We all have issues, right? But as parents, we look away from those issues. We do. We try to help the children with those issues, and we look away as much as we can. When it comes to royalty, royalty works very, very differently. Royalty works almost on a merit system, and it works on who's the right person for the right thing. And they give out jobs. And some people get one job, and some people get another job. Right? And I don't even think it works with favors. I think if you look today in Parliament, it's always who supported whom during the general election, then who made it a prime minister, and then they'll look back at all their emails and look back and who was on my side, they'll get some cushy jobs in the cabinet or in the shadow cabinet. Who wasn't on my side, who was backing the other side, they won't get as good, they might get nothing. They'll be a backbencher. They won't be all the front. But let's say within the service of Hashem, or within the service even of the king, let's say you've been given a job and you decide, that's not my job. I'm going to do something else. I'm going to do something different. Right? So let's say you're a pilot. Yeah, let's go. Let's talk about military. You're a pilot. Your expertise is in flying these super planes at supersonic speed and being able to do amazing things with them. It was very funny. I heard this story this week. I thought it was hilarious. 2 years ago, they brought two, I think, F-131s or F-135s, fighter planes to Israel. American fighter jets, like the most amazing, amazing thing. It says they have this fighter jet with a helmet. The helmet itself costs $6 million. It's been created by Lockheed Martin. The helmet itself costs $6 million. And you look through the helmet and you just think, or you want to do something, and the helmet, it does it for you. It's just unbelievable. And they delivered it. The Secretary of Defense in America especially came to Israel, and the general of the Air Force came to meet him, and they had some kind of ceremony where they brought the airplanes and everything, and they the U.S. fellow gave a whole speech about how wonderful the airplanes are, and then the Israeli general got up and he said, we'd like to thank you for these wonderful airplanes that you've created, and we want to tell you one thing. We're going to check it out. We're going to work on it. We're going to find any flaws that you have, and we will improve it, and we'll send you all the improvements. And that's exactly what happened. The Israelis improved a few things, and they sold them back to America, to Lockheed Martin. That's how it goes. So if you're a pilot and you come and you said, you know what? I don't want to be a pilot. Today I fancy being in infantry. I want to be in the infantry. I'm going to fight on the floor, on the ground. What are they going to do? Are they going to see that as some kind of positive step? Look at this fellow. Instead of sitting in his little cockpit up there, far away from everybody else, he actually wants to go into battle and fight with everybody else. Ah, what a tzaddik. What are people going to say? Get back in your plane.
Yeah, you wasted millions of pounds with training or something.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not only the training. You are an expert at doing this. You have a certain job in life, and that job in life is your job. That's what you need to work with. Right? So you say, but I fancy being an infantryman today. I fancy being something else. I don't care what you fancy. I don't care what you want. It's not about, in Malchus, it's not about what you want. Children and parents, you can have that kind of relationship. You can have that conversation about, I want, he wants, she wants, how are we going to do it? When it comes to king, when it comes to servants serve a king the way the king wants them to serve them, not the way the servant thinks is best. And therefore the Talmud Rebbe explained, he says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives everybody within that remit of servants of Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives everybody their unique capabilities, their unique challenges, and their unique mission. And if a person is not physically capable of being a Kohen, then his mission in life is not to be a Kohen. That's not his mission. So you say, but that's unfair. That's just the way it is. Everybody's giving different information. You can't choose your mission, and that's part of the problem. I think people feel that they have a right to say, and this is a lot of the arguments, specifically when it comes to lots of different things, religious freedom, women's rights, all these things. It's very much about me. I would like to. And I feel that the rabbis, or I feel that God, or I feel that the Torah is not sensitive to my feelings and the way I would like to interact with Judaism. And we say that's not how we do things. We're not interacting with God on our level. God has given us the opportunity to interact with him on his level and with his rules. And whether you like it or not, those are the rules that we're going to interact with him. And everybody will get a different job from God. So you say, but this fellow, he can't do X, Y, and Z. Well, I guess then that's not his mission in life. Right? So, and sometimes you speak about that when people speak about a vocation, right? Take that as an example. You speak to people about what you do. Yeah? I've thought about this sometimes for myself, right? Could I go out maybe and work in business? Sure. Is there anything wrong with me going out to work in business? No. But I believe, or I feel, that I love what I do. But beyond that, there's certain talents that I've been given. And it would be a shame to waste those talents on something else when I can use these talents in the job that I have. But that's my mission. I know other people that sadly stutter. They probably won't make wonderful pulpit rabbis because stuttering is not a great thing for somebody who needs to get up and speak in public. Having said that, what was that film about? What was it, George? Which one of the... Who stuttered?
The king.
The king, yeah.
George VI.
George VI, yeah. And there was that whole film of how this fellow helped him out of his stutter, right?
Yeah, the King's Speech.
Yeah, the King's Speech, right. I didn't watch it, but I'm sure that was it's a tremendous thing to be able to help people on that kind of a level, to help them overcome that. And some people overcome it, and some people never overcome it.
But he didn't want that job. He didn't volunteer.
Who?
The king.
The king didn't want to be the king.
No.
It's a good job he was, because the other one was a Nazi sympathizer.
Yeah, okay, well, Baruch Hashem. Baruch
He
Hashem.
got propelled into it accidentally.
Yeah, okay, well, look, he got propelled into it, and now he's something. But there are many people that they might not have the capabilities to do, right? But they'll have other capabilities that I won't have. So who's better and who's worse? There's no better and worse. It's not because I have certain capabilities somebody else does that makes me better. It doesn't make me better. Somebody else has other capabilities that I have. That doesn't make him better. It means God has given everybody their talent and their capabilities and their unique mix. And you need to look at that unique mix that you have, and with it, make the most of what you can. Because that's what God wants from you. So you say, but I want to be whatever else it might be. Yeah? So let's say, it sounds ridiculous. If I got up one day and I say, I want to be a Kohen, I want to duchen, and I want to be able to be called up first to the Torah, and I want to get the first job at benching, and I want to be a Kohen. So what do you say to me? Sorry.
Speak to your father.
Speak to my father. Thank you very much. Maybe he can arrange for that one. He can arrange for all kinds of things. Maybe arrange for that also. Yeah? Speak to your father. Ridiculous. You can't be a Kohen. I said, but I'd like to be. That's lovely. I'm not taking that away from you. I'm not saying it's a bad aspiration to have in life. But it's not a realistic aspiration in life because I'm not a Kohen. So from today till tomorrow, I can stand on my head and I can scream and I can say I'm a Kohen. I can say whatever I want to. In the end of the day, God didn't make me a Kohen. So then that means God didn't want my service to be the service of a Kohen. Is that unfair? I don't think it's unfair. It's what God chose for me. You don't like it? I'm not saying you have to like it. But it is where you are.
But do we have to resign ourselves to our peckle?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. What do you mean with that?
Tons of people who say, I could never do maths.
Right.
So they just resign themselves.
No, I believe that. So there's two things when you say resigning yourself to your peckle. I'll say two things about resigning yourself. Number one, when there are people that decide, and I've said that to people, I said, if you've decided before and you can't do it, I guarantee you cannot do it. Yeah, that's true. Because once you've resigned yourself that you can't do it, so you're not even going to give it a good try. You're not give it a fair shot. Why would I try? If I said I can't do maths, whatever problem you give me, I'm going to look at it and go, I can't do this. Because I've resigned myself to it already. Yeah? But does that mean I'll be able to figure out, quantum physics? No. I could try. And sometimes that'll work, sometimes it won't work. It is very, very hard. Don't resign yourself to that. Yeah? Certain things you are resigned to. I'm resigned to the fact that I'm not a Kohen. That's something I'll never be able to do. Somebody who has a disability will be resigned to the fact that even if he's a Kohen, will never be able to serve in the Beis Hamikdash. That is something that God gave him, and he has to be resigned to that. We don't have to be resigned to things that we can change. Certain things we can change. Right? But the other thing about resigning yourself to your peckle, and that is in general about, and it has to do a lot with suffering, is that you cannot choose, and that's the other peckle that people speak about. When people speak about a peckle, people speak about suffering. You cannot often rid yourself of the tsaros, but you can have the right attitudes towards them. Right? That is the one thing that you don't have to give in on. You can decide what your attitude is going to be. Right? You might suffer, but the question is, will you feel the suffering? Some people suffer and they're able to go through life with a smile. Some people suffer and they can't help themselves. And they can't figure out how the other person is smiling. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So you don't have to be resigned to suffering that way. But what I found was really, really interesting about this, first of all, I found it tremendously sensitive that the Rebbe never discussed it with his fellow around. Because at the end of the day, there's that sensitivity that you have to have, that this person still, with all the logic in the world, it still hurts. Okay? Let's be honest about it. With all the logic in the world, it's still a hard thing to hear. Right? But on the other hand, at least for us to understand and to know the fact that God has created people different. And in the same way, when it comes to relationships, it's not about how I want to relate to someone else, but it's often about trying to find the best way for them to be relatable. So let me give you an example. Yeah, I find this very strongly with certain people. Do you ever give a present to someone for their birthday, for your anniversary? Yeah. What kind of present do you choose? Do you choose the present of the kind of things that you love? Or do you choose the present, the kind of thing that the person you're giving the present to loves? Somebody who knows how to give a present knows, I might love bowling, I might love football. The person I'm giving the present to hates sports. So if I buy the person I can spend a lot of money, I'll buy him a signed Messi, Ronaldo shirt, jersey. Real Madrid, I got on this shirt and it was expensive. It cost me 250 pounds at some kind of auction. And I bring it to them and the guy looks at it and goes, thanks. Yeah, and you're like, thanks. That's the thank you I get for buying you such a wonderful present. But to the other person, it's really a useful, irrelevant present. I don't play football, I don't follow football, and Ronaldo is irrelevant to me. I don't care. Right? Now, does that mean I didn't try? Does that mean my present is worthless? No, but does that mean that I've been able to interact with the person in the best way possible? No. But if I know the other person likes fishing, even if I hate fishing, I'll get him something on fishing. I might say to myself, but fishing is the most boring thing in the world. I couldn't manage fishing. That's what you think. The other guy seems to like it. So why don't you interact with him on his level? He likes fishing, buying a book of fishing. I don't know, buy him a voucher to a fishing shop. I don't care what it is. But that's what he likes, not what you like. Same is true with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We want to interact with God on our terms. And God says, wait a minute, why is it on your terms? You've decided, I'm a woman, but I want to do all the mitzvahs of a man. I'm a man, I don't want to do any of the mitzvahs that the men do. I want to do this, I want to do that. God says, this is not a pick and choose. It's not a pick and mix. There's a way that we do things and a way that we don't do things. And that goes through for Kohanim, it goes through for men, and it goes through for women, and it goes through Leviim, and it goes for people that sadly are disabled. Whatever it is, everybody God has put them in their specific situation, and they need to take that situation that they have and make the most of that situation. And not look at somebody else and say, I'm going to be him or her. Because if God wanted you to be him, he would have made you him. He made you you because he wanted you. And if he made a person disabled, sadly, then he wanted that person to be disabled and to have to work with that disability. Your job is to work with that disability. Not your job is not to bring korbanos in the Beis Hamikdash. But I'd like to bring a korban in the Beis Hamikdash. That's very nice. It's lovely what you want to do. That's about me, not about God. And Avodas Hashem in general, our entire way of focusing on our service of God needs to be that exactly. The service of God. Not servicing myself and doing God a favor by doing something for him. Servicing Hashem. Doing what Hashem wants for Hashem because that's what you want to do. And that's what you think is important. That is true service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Not deciding a priori what you think the best way is to serve Hashem and then get upset with Hashem for him not giving the opportunity to do that. Obviously, Hashem wanted it to be different. It's hard. It really is hard. If everybody, everybody has their limitations and they want, sometimes you want to overcome those limitations and you can't. But if you recognize and realize that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given everybody the unique challenges and Hashem wants your avodah, your specific way of serving him, in the way he has given your situation and everything, and you appreciate it and you accept it, then your avodah is much more meaningful than what you want to do or think is important. It's not what you think is important, it's what God gave you as a job. That's what's important.
So is it wrong to join the Paralympics? Should you just resign yourself to the fact that you
can join them, but why shouldn't the guy join the Paralympics? Absolutely. Absolutely. Why?
Because Hashem gave him very limited mobility.
So with that limited mobility, he can do whatever he wants to. But you can't join the Beis Hamikdash. You can join the Paralympics from today till tomorrow. You won't be able to join the Beis Hamikdash. But it means not being depressed that you can't join the Beis Hamikdash because Hashem said, I don't want you. I want you doing something else. You have a different job, not a worse job. People like to look at them and say, I'm better and he's worse. He's better and I'm worse. That's not what it is. I think personally, for example, Paralympians are much greater heroes to me than regular Olympic athletes because they've had to overcome all their disabilities to become these top athletes. Whereas other people, they're also to be admired for all the work they put into becoming top athletes, but they didn't have to work against the same kind of problems as somebody who is paralyzed. So of course you can become a Paralympian. But you won't be able to work in the Beis HaMikdash. And as long as you resign yourself and say, but that's not what God wanted from me. God gave me a different job and are happy with that, then that's exactly what God wants from you. That is your job. Anyway, thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining me. Thank you very much for joining us live. Please do like or share and pass around the word. Thank you.
Thank you very much.